excited about the Hangout, and I cannot tell you how useful this is going to be, because even the 10 minutes that we spent talking about what are the different things you can protect besides your hindquarters, and she told me that you can basically protect everything, and I love that. And I am such a stupid ass for not thinking of this before. So I'm really excited to present to you Madame Heather, and she's going to tell you all about herself. She's a wonderful person. I'm just going to shut up, but I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how it's going to work. She's going to take the stage from on here. She's going to introduce herself, and then she's going to start talking about the different laws that can help us protect us as online entrepreneurs. And then once she's done with that, I've asked you guys to drop your questions in the comment box under the post that I made. I will ask her the questions on behalf of you, and then she can answer those questions for us. I also have 2 questions. You know that I have been stolen from twice in 3 weeks. So I'm like, honestly, I have some burning questions that I want to ask her, but I'll also be taking your questions. So please drop your questions in the comment box, and I'll get the conversation going in the comment box. But from now, the stage is in the ball or the stage, whatever. Something is in her court. There's something that's in her court. Just take it.
Excellent. Thank you, Bushra, and hello, everybody on the call. So welcome, and I hope that we are able to cover a lot of content today and answer some of your questions that you may have and that Bushra has about how we protect ourselves as online entrepreneurs. My name is Heather Pierce Campbell. I have been practicing law here in Seattle for 13, almost 14 years, and I spend my time helping businesses get protected. I'm both an attorney and a legal coach. And so a lot of the work that I do online with other entrepreneurs is through my legal coaching business. And that helps people understand, because a lot of what we're going to talk about has broad application around the United States and throughout the world. So there's a lot of things that we can cover that will be helpful for everyone. And really quick, before we get started, Bushra, we didn't talk about timing. What's your thoughts? I want to be respectful of your time constraints, people on this call.
Okay, so I am an old fart, which means I need to be in bed by 9:30. It's already 8 o'clock, so I think we should kind of keep it under 1 hour.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to get a sense. Thank you. So back to, the questions around how we protect our content. There's a lot of ways that we can protect our businesses, ourselves, and our content. And before I launch into that, I do, being an attorney, have to provide a caveat that obviously I am an attorney. I will be providing legal information today, but not legal advice, right? So nothing that I say here creates an attorney-client relationship. I just have to be very careful, because I do practice law, to let people know that, I'm providing legal information. I hope you will find it extremely helpful. I'm really excited to be here and be sharing this with everyone, but it's not a, client-attorney relationship. Okay, that's done. So jumping into the meat and potatoes, where do we start? When we are, doing online business, we are an online entrepreneur, I as an attorney often take for granted people don't know even like what tools are available to them. So let's quickly go through the various, I'm going to call it levels of protection, ways that you can protect yourself here in the United States, and it will be the same in many other countries. The first level of protection is having a business structure, right? And that for many people, that includes, and a lot of people do that first step. They set up an LLC, they talk to an attorney or go to LegalZoom or somehow get a business structure in place. A lot of people don't. So let's talk about what the difference is and what happens if you do have a legal structure, a formally, structured business versus not. In the United States, if you don't set up a formal business structure, you're essentially considered a sole proprietor. And what that means is that you and your business are one and the same. And it exposes you through your business to personal liability, meaning that all of your personal assets, and if you're married, your spouse's assets are on the line for risks that you take on through your business, right? A little bit scary. People don't often think about, they think about functioning in their own little bubble, doing their business stuff. And especially when you're getting started, you think, well, like, I'm small enough, I don't really have that much risk. It's really easy to think that there's not any risk. And the reality is that especially if you are somebody that's delivering information that people rely on, you have risk. People, right? People will rely on your information. You can't guarantee that they're going to do the right things in relying on your information. You can hope that you've delivered it in a way that they know exactly how to use the information you've provided. But a lot of people, may in their own minds have some assumption that they've made about the results they're going to get, about how their life is going to change, about how they're going to lose 50 pounds or whatever. And if it doesn't happen or something adverse happens instead, you have risk. So the step number 1 is business structure, right? And you obviously probably would need to talk to an attorney about that, because that totally depends on your individual scenario, your business, your growth trajectory, your tax planning. There's a lot of factors that go into deciding what structure is right for you and your business. That said, let's essentially any business structure, whether it's an LLC, whether it's an S Corp, whether it's a corporation, will provide some level of protection. And again, depending on your business, you have various levels. But the goal is to have your personal assets and your personal life one step removed from your business so that they're not commingled. They're not one and the same. And you don't open up your family's home and your, personal belongings to a judgment if something were to go wrong in your business. So that said, let's move to the next step, because let's say you don't have a business structure in place. And even if you do, the next step is to have proper contracts, right? And contracts, contracts cover everything. The word contracts, a legal contract is basically an agreement between you and your client, you and a website visitor, that governs the relationship, governs what you deliver, governs the terms of use, governs essentially anything that you want contained within that contract, right? And that's where a lot of entrepreneurs, and especially online entrepreneurs, are not covered. Right? And I've seen it. It's what actually inspired me to put together my legal coaching business in a way that will allow me to serve people throughout the United States. And obviously, I even work with people internationally on this. But to help them understand, what levels of protection they can have from various tools. And essentially, if you have any aspect of your business that either delivers information or a certain service, or you do it in a different way. So let's say, for example, you are an online entrepreneur, you deliver programs or services through your website or through an online membership site. That's one facet of your business. You need language in place protecting your website, protecting the way you deliver your content, your program, especially if it's something for sale, a program or service that is for sale. You absolutely need terms and conditions that govern that exchange. And we'll get to more about that, because this will apply directly to, for example, Bushra's examples of having 2 or 3 people rip off her content in the last few weeks, right? And then let's say you also work one-on-one with your clients. You need a contract that governs your one-on-one work. So, and some people are speakers, some people conduct interviews, like you have all these multiple facets of your business, especially if you live in the information world. And you essentially need to understand that each part of your business needs protection. And it doesn't have to be tough. It just needs certain language, certain legal documents, legal language governing the exchange of that information, right? That exchange of services. And actually, there's a really great tool that I've developed. If you hop over to my website, you can do it later, you can do it now, whatever. It's super easy though. If you go to legalwebsitewarrior.com, which I think is listed on my headline. And then you actually, it's in a weird place, but if you go to the bottom of my testimonials page, I've developed like a drop down, like you'll see a list of like, do you do this? And then you click on the plus and then it says, then you need this. It covers like 10 different aspects of being an online business. And keep in mind that my services are tailored towards people who live in information services like Bushra. So somebody who deals with information, maybe you're a consultant, maybe you're a coach, maybe you're an online educator of some kind. That's going to be what that list of tools will walk you through. But it's going to be broadly applicable to a lot of people who have any kind of online presence and online business. So when you have a moment, walk through that, because it'll help you understand the basic tools that you need if you do certain things in your business. And so you have that level of protection, which is obviously legal language, legal contracts that you put in place essentially ahead of time, so you host your website terms and conditions. You have your program terms of purchase. Let's say if you're like Bushra selling an online program that people pay for, then they get exclusive content, right? What having a program terms and conditions does is it gives you a contractual basis for anything a contractual basis to both protect your work and pursue any violators if you have somebody take your content later on, right? So we have federal copyright law here in the United States, and actually, internationally, we have pretty good copyright protections. I need to say the caveat that I'm not a copyright, patent, or trademark attorney. So this is the 101 overview of copyright, patent, trademark law, but it'll be really helpful if you have any issues with people taking your content, because I do know how to pursue people, how stuff gets resolved, and what goes wrong in that world. And so back to the contract language, we're talking about, the contractual level of protection gives you an added level of protection on top of existing copyright law. And we'll talk about what that means. But you do have protection under copyright law for essentially, if you are the author of any work or any creation, you automatically have copyright protection for that. In the United States, you can register that copyright or trademark or patent, right? And especially in copyrights, let's start by talking about copyrights. You get an extra level of protection, but you do have some amount of automatic protection just being the author of a work. So let's say that you are a photographer and you create a whole set of images. You don't have to do anything to actually already have copyright protection for those images. Now, if you want to go register them, that essentially, you pay for it, obviously, but that puts the government on notice and a government stamp on the fact that you own the rights to that content, right? But you already have the copyright ownership just by merely being the author and creator of that work. So understand that. And people all the time, how often do people building websites jump on, and I think more and more people are understanding this is not okay to do, but they snag photos that they just find anywhere, right? Understand that that is a total violation of federal copyright law. Even though it exists on the web, even if it doesn't have a label or a tag on it, that was somebody's work that they created that's automatically protected by that law. Same goes for you. Anything that you write, right? You are the author of that work. So anything that you create on your own website, you are the author of that work, presumably. You're not taking it from other people. That's automatically protected by copyright law. But if you have a contract in place in your program terms and conditions or your program terms of purchase, that gives you a contractual basis as well that protects your work and should prevent people from being able to just copy and borrow it and take it. Plus, it puts them on notice that you are somebody that takes your work seriously when you have those tools in place, right? And when somebody is signing up for your program and they either have to click a box that says, I have read and I agree to these terms and conditions, or somehow acknowledge that they've received access to those and they agree before they purchase, it's a much stronger level of protection for your content. So that being said, you know, what happens when somebody does take your content, right? That's the whole point of why we're here. And certainly the advanced protections can build your foundation so that later, again, you have a contractual right to pursue those people, or at least notify them like, hey, so-and-so, you've breached the program terms of purchase. You agreed to these when you purchased my program. And now here you are, I see all of this content everywhere on your website, right? Gives you an additional level of protection, and it makes somebody less likely to do that and more likely to respond if they've essentially clicked off and signed either an agreement or agreed to those terms and conditions. You don't always have to go to the level of pursuing them under federal copyright law. Okay, does that make sense? Does that?
Actually, yes, I have been waiting for someone to give me the permission to go after them. And you know, luckily or unluckily, both of them have pulled down their, you know, content right away. But you also told me to take screenshots, and I did take screenshots. So even though they pulled it down, I was quick enough to take screenshots before they pulled it down. But yeah, you're right. I think we need to be a little bit braver, you know, and a little bit less lazy and go after them, because, you know, I didn't know what to do, and that's why I kind of reached out to you. So yeah, totally makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's an uncomfortable place to be, right? So here we are as online entrepreneurs. We pour our heart, our time, our energy into creating amazing content. And I see this everywhere. And I've worked with people who have reached like really fabulous, you know, achievements in their careers, and some of them still didn't have a lot of these protections in place, right? So business online is a new enough world that many people are still doing it like fairly unprotected. And my goal is to help people change that and to feel more empowered, to know what to do when something like that does happen, but to also start off by knowing what tools do I need, and especially once I reach certain levels in business, what tools do I need? And often when people have really growing businesses, they've developed quite an audience or a following, it's really purely statistics that you end up with a certain amount of people inside your programs that are willing to take your content. It happens everywhere, right? So it's an invitation to us as business owners to be very proactive about our creations, proactive about what we put together and what we teach other people to do through our business, and protect it. And I tell my clients this all the time: if you don't treat your business like a business, other people will not treat it like a business. And part of that is getting the legal foundation in place so that you have language to reference back to when somebody does something stupid like this. And then you also have additional protections, right? But it gives you a starting point to say, hey, you agreed to this when you signed on to my program, or you used my website, or agreed to pay for this content. Doesn't mean that you get to go use it in these ways, you know, and refer them back to the agreement that you have in place, or the terms of purchase that you have in place. Now, let's look at, for example, Bushra, where you are. Let's say that those people hadn't taken down the content. What do you do, right? And I get a lot of questions about cease and desist. Well, do you just send a cease and desist, right? And a lot of that flies around. You see a lot of comments on it in various forums. And so I wanted to be sure that we covered that today, because it's an often misunderstood area of copyright law. And people have a lot of questions about how a cease and desist letter is properly used, when it's properly used, who should draft it, right? So a lot of people will jump on and copy a cease and desist letter that they find online and try to use it in protecting their work. And, you know, let's talk about what happens under copyright law when you send a cease and desist. One is that you're putting somebody on notice that you believe they're infringing upon your copyright, right? And when that happens, if somebody feels like they have a valid claim to that content, or maybe they feel like, well, our content is similar, but this is my content, it's not your content. I didn't take it, I didn't steal it, you know, this is my own stuff. if you haven't yet filed a lawsuit, and, you know, even if you're in a foreign country, and again, I'm not an international attorney, but my understanding is that copyright law is very similar. And actually, other countries often have greater protections for copyright even than the US does, meaning in a lot of countries, you don't have to even register your copyright. And Bushra, I think that is true for Saudi Arabia. I
have no idea.
Yeah, but my brief research shows me that I think it's like the UK, and I don't think that I don't think you're required to register a copyright. That said, what that means is that when you create something there's a whole bunch of international agreements between various countries, and one is called the Berne Convention. It's a very strong agreement between countries that they will respect each other's copyrights. Like if somebody has registered a copyright or other protection in their home country, they automatically receive that level of protection in the other country, right? So through that convention, you actually have pretty strong copyright claims, even internationally speaking. But again, getting back to the cease and desist, like when you tell somebody to take down content via a cease and desist letter, if you have not yet filed a lawsuit in your home venue, so let's say I'm in Seattle and somebody rips off my content in Florida, and I send them a cease and desist and I have not yet filed a lawsuit here in Seattle, if that person believes they have a valid claim to that content, they can turn around and file a lawsuit in Florida that binds me to litigating my issue in Florida. That's the risk of sending a cease and desist if you have not yet filed a lawsuit. A lot of people think like, well, it's just going to scare them off, it's going to make them take it down, and they'll run away and we'll be all done, right? They send a cease and desist as a way to try to avoid legal fees, and it can sometimes have the opposite effect. If you have not yet filed litigation or filed your lawsuit where you are based, then you get dragged into litigation clear across the country and you have to go defend that lawsuit. Not very fun. Travel expenses, hiring an attorney on the far side of the United States, So there are issues with sending a cease and desist if you're not properly counseled, if you haven't talked to an attorney, if you're not intending on filing a lawsuit, I would say be very careful about sending a cease and desist. So what does that mean? What can you do in that instance, right? So here's something that a lot of people don't know about that will often get very prompt action. And what you do is, let's say you find somebody that's ripped off your content. You do like what Bushra has done, screenshot everything, right? Document this, capture it in your screenshots, save it all to a file, copy the web address that goes with the screenshot so that you actually have the web address to refer to. So just make sure that you copy, all of that content, you get it down, you understand the various web pages that it's showing up on. And then what you can do is you can essentially send what is called, so it's called a takedown notice, but you don't send it to the person directly. This is the part that's important to understand, is that everybody's website is obviously hosted by a website provider, right? An ISP, Internet Service Provider. And you can find that information by going to Whois, right? The Whois database. Most people know about that if you have your own website and you're hosting your own or paying for hosting for your website. You can search Whois, which is just how it sounds, WHOIS. Just go put that into Google. You can put in the name of the website and find out who the internet service provider is. It'll come up in the Whois search. And then what you do, so let's say that it's Bluehost, right? I host all of my websites through Bluehost. You find out the host name, the internet service provider, and then you go to their website. So I did this earlier this morning just to see what they say. And I went to Bluehost, which I'll pull up right now, and just to walk you through what this example would look like. Every internet service provider on their own website are going to have their own terms and conditions about what happens if they're hosting somebody's website that that may be infringing on somebody else's copyrights, right? They tell you right in their terms and conditions what to do about it. So I'm just gonna bear with me for 1 minute because I want to walk you through this example. So for Bluehost, for example, you go to their terms and conditions, which usually you find at the bottom of a website, and they have a specific section that says they have the list of all these issues that are going to have various policies that go with the issue. And theirs specifically says copyright claims policy, right? So you're going to look for that at the website, the internet service provider's homepage. Go to their terms, look for their copyright claims section, click on that, and then here's what they say. They will, first of all, give you, a notice about what happens if you believe somebody's infringing on your copyright. Tell you where to send the notice to, because you're sending it to Bluehost. You're sending it to the internet service provider that accompanies the website, right? They'll give you usually an address, a mailing address, and an email address, and a phone number to call, or a fax number so that you could fax in your notice. And then usually they will tell you very specifically, exactly what needs to be contained in the notice, right? So they'll tell you under Bluehost, for example, that they need your physical or electronic signature on the document, that you need to identify the copyrighted work claimed to have been infringed, right? So that would be your own website. Somebody rips off your website, then that's the work that you've created that you're claiming has been infringed upon. You identify that for them so that they can look at it. The next part is you identify the material that you are claiming is infringing. So that's where you identify the other person's work, right? And that's why it's really important to take down each of the web pages that you think are infringing upon your work, and also the screenshots. You provide that information to them, showing them what was put up on the infringer's website, along with a URL to that relevant web page. And then the next point is information reasonably sufficient to allow the online service provider to contact the complaining party. So you need to hunt down some kind of contact info for that person, whether it's their email address, whether they have a phone number, a mailing address, whatever you can find, provide that as well, so that gives the host, the internet service provider, a way to readily contact them. And you can sometimes find that information in the Whois database as well if they're not, if their privacy settings are not turned on. But usually you can find their contact info right through their website as well. And then you need to make a statement that the complaining party has a good faith belief. So you're the complaining party. You have to state that you have a good faith belief that the use of the material in the manner complained of is not authorized by you. You just essentially need to say, I did not authorize this particular use of my material. Finally, you basically have to say that what you are putting into the notice is accurate, and under penalty of perjury, that you as the complaining party are authorized to act on your own behalf, right? And if you have an attorney doing it for you, then it's much easier, and they do that. But what that means is it gives the service provider, first of all, you've made a statement that in good faith, you're not lying, you've put all this information together, it's your material, it's protected by copyright law, and somebody has ripped it off. Gives them a good faith basis to remove the content. Internet service providers will often do that same day, because what happens is if you send them a takedown notice and they don't take it down, they are on the hook for damages as well, or may partially be on the hook, right? They don't want anything to do with that. So YouTube, Bluehost, and GoDaddy, all of the various places that host content, host other people's websites, other people's content, are going to have their own set of terms and conditions that, just like this, will walk you through what you need to provide them to allow them in good faith to act upon your claim and take down the content. And if they do that, then they have zero liability. So most of them will do that. You send a notice over that says, hey, here's the issue, this is my content, here's the infringing party, here's all the information you need, and give them exactly what they're asking for. A lot of them will take it down same day.
I
And then
love this. I have to kind of stop you and tell you how much I love this. It's very, very actionable. It's very, as anyone can do it. If you
that's
find
right.
anything, instead of just kind of cribbing and complaining and whining like I was doing, it's really simple to just kind of have that evidence file and just approach and I think that's also more painful for the thief, because if their whole website or web pages are taken down, it's embarrassing, and it's kind of, so I love this. I love this solution. So does the notice have to have any specific format, or can it just be a simple email? You attach all of these things that you just told us about and just email them?
And they'll tell you, this is where it's important to find the host, find the internet service provider, go to their terms, go to their copyright claims section, and actually just follow the step-by-step requirements of what they're asking for. And so long as you do that in the format that they ask, and so, for example, with Bluehost, you can either send written correspondence to their mailing address that they give you right there, or you can fax it to the fax number, or you can email it to this email address, right? They make it so easy.
Excellent.
So they're all about complying with the law. They don't want to be on the hook for damages related to anybody's copyright claims. But understand that once they take it down, again, they have zero liability. The internet service provider essentially gets taken out of the picture. That's usually enough for the offending person, right? The bad party, we'll call them, that stole your content. That's usually enough for them to understand, like, in a major way, I shouldn't have done that, and I won't be putting that content back up. But if they do, then it becomes a direct claim between you and the party directly, right? The internet service provider has done their job. They took it down once. If the other person puts the content back up, then you need to deal directly with that party. And that may be where you take things to the next step and actually speak with an attorney, consider not whether you want to file a preliminary lawsuit or how to approach them.
So sorry, I have a question here. So a lot of people would tell you, and I don't know, I've heard this again, like the cease and desist advice. I've also heard this kind of flying around in forums and groups. They would say, oh, don't approach them directly. Let's just talk to them. Is there any risk with approaching them directly and just saying, you know what, just don't do this. I will crush your head if you do this. Is there any issues or any risks with? So I think kind of unconsciously, maybe I had this, so the student and the loyal follower of mine who stole my business model, I approached her right away because I was fuming. But in a lot of cases, they tell you, oh, don't approach them directly. You don't want to get into a conversation because that could be held against you. Is there a risk in that?
So here's what the risk is. Yes, a couple things. One is if you put somebody on notice that they are infringing on your rights, again, it starts the clock ticking, both for you to pursue your own rights under either copyright or patent, law, where if you don't pursue something within a certain period of time, and I think it's 6 years, so you have a bit of time. But let's say for big companies, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, something like that, they may, have a lot more money on the line, and they'll send out a notice, and somebody continues to use the copyright or trademark or patent wrongfully, and they don't do anything about it, then you essentially waive your rights to that claim if you don't pursue it within certain timelines. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the risks. The other risk is a little bit like what we talked about before. If you are in any way insinuating or flat out stating you are infringing upon my intellectual property rights, it gives the person a valid basis. You have to have an actual conflict or dispute to be able to file a claim, under federal copyright, patent, trademark law, right? So when you have an altercation or an exchange via email that's documentable saying, hey, you're infringing on my rights, that's enough for them to go, again, file a lawsuit and drag you into it, and they get to choose the venue. You don't want the other person to choose the venue. If you're going to end up in a legal battle, you want to have it in your home state, your home area, have access to local legal counsel. right? If you're going to have to battle it out. And so that's the risk, is that if you give them enough to go with that it actually shows a valid dispute, and they take that to an attorney, they may very well get the advice that they should file the lawsuit first in their hometown, in their home state or hometown. Then you'd have to go defend it there. So that is the risk. And it's why you will find that some of the advice out there is more like gently approaching somebody like, hey, I noticed, X, Y, and Z about your website. What are your plans for using this material? Having it be very open-ended, where they clearly are on notice that you're aware of the content. So let's say it's somebody that's taken your course. You didn't have program terms and conditions, so you don't have a contractual basis to go after them. You probably do have a federal copyright or, trademark or patent law, depending on the violation, claim, but you don't want to file a lawsuit. You just are not interested in legal fees. You would take a very soft approach and essentially inviting them into a conversation about, like, what's your planned use of this material, right? This level of dialogue, this is getting into very strategic stuff about the content, the other person. Like, every scenario really depends on the two people involved, what the issues are. So again, just understand this is very general information for you. But it does outline the variety of approaches that you can take and what the risks are if you take a certain approach and not another. Does that make sense?
It does totally. So tell me, so this is basically about if someone basically steals your content, and I'm assuming that applies both for content that's free in public domain, like your blog posts or your sales pages or all, and the content that's behind the payment wall. So if they, it applies to both. So copyright infringe, it would apply to both. The other thing that we talked about before we went live was this whole idea of, what if they steal something that's not tangible? So it's not an exact replica, the copy is not the same, but the business model is eerily similar, or the way they deliver it, or the way they approach it, or your formula. Let's just say you have this, you're a weight loss coach, and you have this, I don't know, five ingredient recipe or meal plan or something, anything, and they create something that's very similar to it. It's not really a direct ripoff of the words, the copy, but it's still very, very similar. Or they rip off a business model, which happened to me, especially in the case, and I'm going to tell you especially why, it kind of I was fuming, and I just had a very confrontational email with her, especially in the situation where before that person comes into takes your course, that person is a completely different business, even a completely different industry. But she comes, she takes your business, she takes your course, and then right after that, she starts something which is the same model, same niche, same industry, same delivery. It's not tangible, but is there any way to protect that, avoid that from happening?
Yes, there is. And we did speak briefly about this, but for purposes of sharing with the group, let's go over this. So copyrights, and again, keep in mind, I'm not an intellectual property attorney. I'm a business attorney, and I deal mostly with contractual issues. But here's what you need to know about the foundational level of, copyright, trademark, and patent law. Copyrights obviously protect copy. So anything that you write, that you create, they protect a ton of variety of works of authorship, right? Copyrights also protect images. You have authored or created an image, a work of art, whatever. Copyrights are pretty broad. Trademarks protect, an actual trademark. So you can trademark, everybody knows Nike's trademark, right? Just do it. Okay, they protect logos, trademarks, short phrases that have the TM after them, right? That's usually something that you immediately associate with a particular business, right? It's very much a brand awareness thing. And patents, so patents are interesting because patents are where you can copyright systems, processes, structures, like It's what Bushra is talking about, is you have a particular method, you have a particular system for the way that you deliver your information or the way that you combine it. That is properly covered under patents. And again, you'd want to have that conversation with a patent attorney, somebody who works in that area of law, because there are very specific requirements that you have to meet to protect certain things. But there are definitely various areas of intellectual property law that do protect those things. So patents is a unique one, but a really important one, because it gets exactly to what Bushra is asking, which is about systems, processes, the way that something is delivered, the unique formation or formulation that you use in doing that particular service or product or whatever.
So is there a way to incorporate this as a term and condition for someone who buys something from you, or no? Unless you have a patent, you cannot incorporate this, for example, in your terms and conditions.
You can. So that's a great question. And again, it's about different levels of protection, right? So on the contractual level, you can absolutely in your terms and conditions say, you know, this is a unique system designed by Bushra Azhar. You're not to use the structure, the format, the way it's delivered, or, you know, imitate in any way the process that I've created. It's unique to my business. So yes, you can put, you know, does that mean that people will absolutely not do that? No, people are still going to do some crazy stuff. You know, does having some of that legal language in place prevent some of the people from doing it? Yes. You know, when there's a contract in place and they've reviewed it, you know, they're less likely to do something to a business that's taking themselves seriously. But then once you have that protection in place, if somebody does it anyway, you can get right back to them and say, look, in your terms and conditions of this program, you agreed to this particular use of the content, not the use, you know, the way that you're using it. So absolutely.
This is brilliant. And where do you recommend the terms and conditions? When should they say, okay, I agree to these terms and conditions? Should it be before the sale? Because, you know, the way I see it, if they are looking to come and steal, they not even go through the sale if you kind of show them the terms and conditions before the sale. So where do you recommend you have this? Is it before they buy, or after they buy, or, you know, where do you recommend this terms and conditions should be?
Excellent question. And let's go over that, because from a legal perspective, there is a difference depending on where you have them live, both on your website and as somebody purchases your content, right? So ideally, what you want with your terms and conditions is called a click wrap. And it's a title. It's everybody knows the iTunes click wrap, right? Like, check here, I agree to the terms of service, you know, to access and use iTunes, right? Everybody knows that one. That is ideally what you want, is a checkbox with a link, you know, very visibly seen. Like, you want it, you know, not to be inconspicuous. You want it to be obvious, and right above a purchase button, I agree to the terms of purchase for this particular program. And that, boom, they should be able to go click on it, open it up in a separate window, read it, go back and agree to it before they purchase. The reason being is if they don't have access to the terms and conditions of the sale, that's essentially what it is, terms and conditions of the sale of this particular thing, they're buying your service or your product without full disclosure of like what the rules are, right? And that's not legally that fair. And so you ideally should do a couple things. One, get a click wrap box, you know, check the box, have those terms be very visible and accessible before the purchase. And usually, you know, any of those terms and conditions are hosted just like let's talk about WordPress, because I know WordPress, right? On your website, you have the option of putting in a footer menu, right? So that's where, you know, you just create a WordPress page, label it terms and conditions. That's going to be your website terms and conditions. Separate page, it's going to be privacy policy. Those two pages are where you host that language. And then you just insert the link down in the footer menu on your website, right? That's custom. That's where people expect to find either a website terms and conditions or a privacy policy with separate links. Super accessible. They can click and review them right there. When it comes to a program, you can host them in the same way. They don't need to show up on your menu because they only need to show up when somebody is going to actually access the program, pay for the program. But you want that page to open once they click on the link. And then I always recommend that in your confirmation email, once somebody purchases the service or the program, in the confirmation email, include a link back to those same terms and conditions of the sale, right? So your program.
I love that. I love
that
that.
way it's fully accessible to it. They saw it before they purchased. They got it immediately after they purchased. There's no question that they have the opportunity to review those terms and conditions. And you know, because those terms and conditions of the program are going to go over things like your refund policy, how they can use the content, you know, all of this stuff. If they have any questions about anything in the program, how they contact you, whatever, if they can't get access or they get locked out, you know, it covers those kinds of questions that people really do have on a regular basis in the same content. And so they can go back to that email, it's a confirmation email, everything lives right there. They can click on the link and again have access immediately to the terms and conditions of the sale. Super helpful, super easy.
I love this. I'm just going to kind of say at this point, because I know there's always a lag in Hangout. So in 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, we'll be moving to the Q&A. So if you have any questions, people, just drop them in the comment box. And I have tons of questions for Heather still. But if you have any questions, just in another 5 to 7 minutes, we'll be moving to the question and answer. Any specific questions that you have, please drop them in the comment box below. Okay, please continue.
Well, so let me think. What else is there to cover? We covered.
I love the tool, and I posted the link to the tool that you have. And I totally think, hello, okay, this is off topic, nothing related to this, but hello, this should be your opt-in. I think this is brilliant. I think it's a brilliant tool, and you should check it out, everyone, because I posted the link in the thread. Basically, you're telling us what do we need. So if you do this, you need this. If you do this, you need this. Here's my question. What is the bare minimum that you recommend everyone should have? So, you know, yes, there are, I went through this and I am like, I need all of this. All of this, but most of this actually. But are there any kind of bare minimum that you say, okay, if you're just starting out, or if you're really worried about this, or let's say you're in a budget, or let's say you don't have time to do everything and you're just going into a launch next week, which, okay, so you're freaking out. What is the bare minimum you should do?
Excellent question. So obviously the answer depends on what you do in your business, but essentially the things to protect first are going to be the things that you sell, right? So again, the paid content that people, so let's say you have an amazing program that you've put together and people are purchasing that, protect it. You want to have this protection in place in case anything like this happens. So for your, you know, your main money makers, whether it's a program, whether it's a one-on-one service, maybe you make most of your money in your business by doing one-on-one coaching or one-on-one consulting. Have a standard client agreement that covers those services. And what that agreement should properly do is obviously define the relationship, define what the deliverables are, you know, timelines, expectations. It's all about educating the client and having really clear boundaries for both of you so that you really understand what's trading hands. And then you're going to probably need to have some limitations on your liability. If you're providing information that people rely on, you need to let them know, like, look, this doesn't guarantee you're going to go make $1 million next year, right? They are responsible for their results and relying on your information. They're responsible for deciding that the information you provide is what they need. They may need professional counseling. They may need, you know, whatever. It's their decision to figure out what they need, and you cannot take all of that on. So you definitely need limitations of liability within your standard contract. There's just a lot of important protections that go into that. So, you know, in whatever way you're making money, especially your biggest money makers, whether that's an online program, whether it's your one-on-one services, have a standard, you know, form contract that covers that protects you, allows you to do that in your business with ease and just knowing, like, I've done what I can. Not going to worry about it. Because the other thing I tell people is you can't protect yourself against everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
My job is to help you get the foundation in place so that you know that you've done what you can, and then you can just like really be in your business without worrying about some of the other things that can go wrong. And if they do go wrong, then there's ways to deal with it, but you're better off if you have those levels of protection in place. So again, you know, look at your services, look at what you do in your business, and start with your biggest money makers to make sure that you protect that. And then additionally, if you're somebody that has a big online following, let's say you're Bushra, let's say you're Lewis Howes, let's say you're somebody that, you know, you get quite a bit of traffic to your main website as well, where you provide amazing content. Maybe you're doing blog posts, maybe you're doing videos where you're giving information, whatever. You really should consider having terms and conditions that protect that content as well, because even people that don't pay for your program will come and visit, and especially if they, you know, are not ethical, which some people just are not, they may be willing to steal some of your free content, and you don't want that either, right? And then save for later things like, you know, if you have to decide, and let's say you're somebody, because you'll see that tool that's on my website where I walk you through the various things. You know, you may do some speaking, you may do interviews, you may do some JV agreements or, you know, affiliate programs, and eventually need some contract language that helps you manage those relationships, protect your work, you know, set out your marketing schedule for any joint marketing efforts, whatever. There are other agreements that can cover those portions of your business. But, you know, to start off with, I would say look at the basics, look at the main ways that you make money, and make sure that those get covered.
Okay, so we have a question.
Okay.
And she private messaged me, which is, I don't know why she didn't post it in the group. Anyway, I think it's a great question. And the question is basically about, you know, kind of paraphrasing it because it's a long story. The whole idea of dealing with refund requests. So even though you do have, and I've had a few situations, but I'm very quick to refund. You know, even if I don't have a refund policy, if someone sends it to me, you know, ask for a refund, I will do it. You know, I don't like to haggle. But she has a valid point. You know, she's saying that if I offer a 30-day refund, and so there are two situations. There's a situation where the person comes to you after 30 days and asks for a refund. And if you don't do it, and if you point them to the terms and conditions, they basically threaten to contact their bank. You know, and that's basically when they contact their bank, they're basically denying the charge. They're basically saying that you're doing an internet fraud, which could put you potentially in a, you know, really shitty situation. The other is which also kind of happened to me, where, you know, even though there is a refund period, you know, you can see from the records that the person went in, accessed your material hundreds of times. So this person that approached me, he accessed the material about 120 times, I think. And then he was like, you know, I don't like what you have to offer. I think it's very basic. I'm much more advanced than that. I issued the refund. I don't want to get into this debate, but honestly, you know, is there a way to protect us against this? It's not really, it's not about the money. It's about the principle, you know. I could have just told him, you know, you went into the website 120 times. If it's too basic, why did you do it? So is there any way we can protect us against that?
Yes, and it's an excellent question. I get a lot of questions, and I've actually developed a specific refund or payment release agreement.
Oh, I love that.
One of the tools that I'll be selling. And what that does, because, you know, look, the bottom line is it's your business. You need this business to work for you. You need it to feel good. You need to be able to make decisions that are consistent with your priorities. That's going to be different from person to person, right? Some of us, like, I don't like bullies. You know, it's a big reason probably that I went into law. Not that I was like bullied as a kid, but I mean, I just have a very strong sense of justice. And I get it. Like, the legal system doesn't always deliver justice. Like, I'm not a fool, but I care very much that people on both sides kind of understand what feels fair, and that's something I care about fairness. And I think for most people, whether you have legal protection or not, that's really what most people care about, is they want something at the end of the day, some resolution that feels fair, right? That may be different from person to person. I might be more willing to pursue somebody based on the fact they accessed my course 120 times and then sent me a shitty message about it, right? So, but it's what fight do you want to fight? Do you have the energy to do that? Some people do. Totally fine. Get your ducks in a row. Put your documents in order. Have everybody sign a terms and conditions before they access your program that has a very clear refund policy, right? Know what your refund policy is and have it clearly stated so that there's no questions about what is going to happen if somebody does X, Y, or Z fall, after the fact. But that said, let's take this example of this woman who had a 30-day period, got contacted afterwards, and then got threatened. That pisses me off because that's really bully behavior, right? Like, there was a generous refund policy. I consider 30 days to be quite generous, and yet he still is trying to push her around. Can you fight it? Probably, and there are a couple ways. One is, like you, Bushra, if you have Google Analytics or you have some analytics inside your course or your program that tracks, when people are accessing, which user they are, which I think at most membership courses these days, like if you're paying for a membership site, you're going to have automatic access to that stuff. If you don't, then yes, it may be a little bit trickier depending on how you've built your membership site or your course and how access was delivered. If it's trackable and you can show the bank, hey, this guy's just being, unethical. He paid for it. I delivered it. Here's the confirmation of that delivery. Here's where it showed that he accessed it 10 times over the course of that month. Here's, again, he's 7 days after the 30-day deadline or whatever, asking for his money back. Here's my clearly stated refund policy. The bank is going to be in a better place to decide what actually happened. They just are going to need the facts from both sides, and the question becomes, what can you document? What can you show the bank, so that they have enough information to make their decision? Some people are not going to want to, be up for that fight. That feels I totally get it. And that's where you just have to say, and for people that are getting into business or who are in business and experiencing this kind of thing, one, again, is have a clearly stated refund policy, decide how strictly you're going to enforce it. But two, is don't be afraid to change your mind. Some of us develop thicker skin than others. Some people just understand there's going to be a certain amount of those kinds of people that come through my business just based on pure numbers, right? You cannot screen, especially in the online world, you cannot screen everybody that you're doing business with. You're just going to get a certain amount of those people. And you may just say, okay, that's a cost of doing business. I'm just going to assume that I'll get a few of those and I'll just deal with them as they come and get them, like you, get them right back out of my program, and I just don't even want to mess with it, right? Other people may want to put up a bigger fight, or, especially if it's a bigger program, a larger program, there's more money on the line. It all depends, case by case analysis, but it's really an individual choice, and certainly helps when you have a clearly drafted refund policy, because then you can provide that to a bank or somebody if they're going to do that kind of stuff on the end. One more thought on that, and it's something that I have included in my template for program terms and conditions that I sell, is you can actually have a section of your language that says, look, by not accessing the membership site or not opening the course or essentially not taking delivery of what I've created once you've paid for it, doesn't allow you the right to ask for a refund. Right? Because there are going to be a certain amount of people that just get too busy. They thought it was a good idea. They signed up for your course, and then life goes on, and 3 weeks later, they're realizing, I haven't even logged in once. I'm just going to ask for a refund. You can have language that prevents them from doing that by, it was their choice not to take delivery of the course. It was their choice not to log in, their choice not to access the content that you created and that they purchased, right? So there are ways to protect around that.
I love this. So can you tell us a little bit more about the kind of products that you have that, obviously there are people, so we are talking tomorrow to see how we can work together, and I absolutely need you in my life. And after this session, I need you even more in my life. Maybe I'll have you move to Saudi Arabia against your consent. I like you so much. But that's besides the point. I'll even take your kid because I think he's really cute. So I'm not sure about the husband, but I think I can have you and your kid move.
Oh, excellent. Well,
absolutely, we're talking tomorrow, but for people who, obviously there will be people who would want to work one-on-one with you, and then there will be people who would be looking to have something off the shelf. And the way you described your program, paid program policies, I think it would work even off the shelf for a lot of people. So do you have any other kind of off the shelf legal documents that people can just kind of take off from you? And are they ready? Can you just take them now? I want to take them now.
They're very close. Thank you for that question. And essentially what I am building, and I'm very close to launching it, is a whole database of these tools. And the way that I've built it is one, and keep in mind, these are tools that are going to be tailored to somebody like Bushra, like many of us online that deliver information. So we're an online consultant, we're a coach, we're an online educator of some kind, right? Our business is built around delivering information, delivering content that we've created. That's really who I specialize with for my pre-built, excuse me, for my pre-built templates and my pre-built tools. And so how those will be delivered is in a few short weeks, I'll be launching a legal basics program that will have a whole variety of those tools inside. You would get access to the actual template, to the tool, really customized to people that do what we are talking about, right? So you already have a tool that's going to be built specifically for your business if you're somebody who lives in the coaching, consulting, or education world, in an online capacity as well. And essentially, they will be like plug and play. You'll get the access to the document, and then I will have video tutorials that accompany each tool to walk you through in a matter of minutes how to complete the tool, how to fill it out, how to get it customized for your business, and then plugged right into your business. And then additionally, for people that are in this legal coaching program, they'll have access to me in a weekly Q&A call, so that for any additional questions that come up, like the ones we've talked about today, they can get that level of advice one-on-one in a weekly call in a group format, so that they benefit from the same questions that other people are going to have, or different questions that we often don't think of, right? But will apply to our business as well. If that's not enough, some people are just going to want the one-on-one work, then they'll be able to get that level of coaching with me a la carte as well. So I really care that people, especially once they have the tools, that they plug them in, that they use them, that they don't hesitate in getting like these very important tools into their business, protecting their work, because I just love how heart-centered most people are in their business. If you are like online and pouring your energy and your heart into things that you create, right? Like, we need to get it protected. I really care that people are not just out there giving their stuff away or getting it ripped off or being mistreated online. I really am against that.
I think everyone has to go through at least one robbery before they will. I don't even have a terms and conditions, I consider myself smart. I think I'm quite smart, but I have been stupid enough not to have anything in place. So I think everyone will probably, with this session, I'm hoping that people will proactively take this action. They don't have to go through the pain of having, feeling betrayed, because this is what you feel. Both people who stole from me, actually the third person as well. Yeah, the three people that I know about who stole from me, all three are buyers. They're clients, so the students. So there's also the sense of betrayal. So great. So when will your course be ready? And so should we just get on your list to know more about this?
Absolutely. You can get on my list. You're welcome to, if you're online right now listening, you're welcome to just drop me an email at info@legalwebsitewarrior.com that says, put me on your wait list in the subject line. It can be very short. I'll just add you and I'll send you some information once it's coming out. It will be very soon. If you need help sooner than that, email me. And you can also go to my website, and I have multiple links that you can follow that will get you on my list there as well. And then you can look at, both the tool that Bushra and I were talking about that's on the bottom of my testimonials page. Like, if you do this, then you need this. It'll walk you through the tools that I'll have available and that may apply to your business. But then in my business tips section, if you are somebody that has a lot of questions around these issues, go peruse that section, because I've written a lot of articles that are up there that just talk about issues that we face as online entrepreneurs, online businesses that could really help you. So
I'm going to drop the link to the business tips as well in the section, in the comment thread. And I honestly cannot thank you enough. I think this was such a needed topic, and you explained it so well. It's like idiot-proof, the entire topic. And I am really excited to talk tomorrow and see what I can do, because I honestly am not ready for another betrayal. So I have to find a solution. And I'm so glad that you took the time. Thank you so much, honestly, for taking the time.
You're welcome. I have one final thought, if I can share it. It's a question that, and I've seen it online in multiple forums, so that's why I want to address it here, because the issue of betrayal that you bring up is huge. Like, we put so much energy into our work that when somebody comes to us, pays for what we've created, and then takes it, it's like, first of all, we assume that anybody who's going to pay for our stuff probably, hopefully respects us, respects the fact that we've put so much into our business, and then, takes it from us. So it is a real issue, like that feeling of betrayal and all of that. And so that is why, as business owners, we have to just be prepared, especially if we're online. And I tell people this all the time. We are not our grandfather's generation, right? A generation or two ago, we did 100% of our business face-to-face with people. Literally, that's almost like exclusively the way that you could do business, unless you're sending things through the post by horse or train, whatever. Nowadays, with online business, it's amazing because it opens up our capacity for business to make it essentially worldwide. So it's a phenomenal tool. And along with that comes exposure through greater risk, because you're not able to interact with everybody one-on-one. You're not able to see who's visiting your business. You don't know what they're doing there. You don't know whether they're trustworthy. And you're able to get a lot more information from people around that when you're having an in-person experience with them. We just have so much more that is able to go into our judgment when we're in person with people. And so just understand that by the very nature of being online, you're going to have people like this that end up at your place of business and are going to do silly things. And so part of it is developing a mentality ahead of time, that knowing it will happen, especially if you're somebody who's awesome and you're rocking it in your business, it's much more likely to happen to you. And then you just have to be very practical about the tools you're going to put in place to protect yourself, and just try to be unemotional about it, even though it's really hard to. You're still have to remember, I'm building a business. I am going to choose, very practically speaking, how to deal with these things, and then I'm going to move on, because I need to be putting more of my energy back into my business. So, there's that. And then part of that is, along with these big followings that people develop, is this huge sense of loyalty. And other people will often jump to the rescue. And I've seen this in multiple groups of well, let us contact her and let her know, or him know. Let's let the offending party know, this is not okay. The one thing I would say to just, people is be cautious about that, only because, again, in the instance of somebody having content up that they either think is their own or that they're going to claim as their own, if there are other third parties involved in either letting them know that they're infringing or somehow, lighting a fire, that's how I'll put it.
That's how we put it.
Yeah, you could have potential exposure for a third party claim for infringement, essentially contractual interference with their business, right? So there is a legal claim that essentially prevents people from improperly interfering in other people's businesses. And that's where, if you have third parties involved also contacting that other person, you may open yourself up to liability in that regard. And so I would just say be very cautious about that.
Thank you so much for this. This is fantastic. And so I'm my head is buzzing, and I have to go to sleep in half an hour. I have no idea how I'll sleep. I feel like I'm honestly, no, because you were so fantastic, and the information that you've given me, the only thing I can think about is, I can't wait for tomorrow, because I am like a sitting duck, honestly. I'm a sitting duck. I don't have any protection at all. So I am like, I'm very glad that we had this session, but I'm also kind of embarrassed with how unprotected this whole thing is.
No, look, yeah. Yeah, no, and it's, it's okay. It's good to recognize when you need certain protections. And that's what, that's what I do. That's what other people out there can do for you. Hopefully I get to do it because I love it. And I really do love protecting people. But I don't ever beat anybody up because you know what? As business owners, we have so much on our plates. We do what we can when we can, right? You've done the best that you can do. This other, it's okay. It's okay. Where you are is totally okay. And the goal is just to start now, look at where you're at, evaluate what you've built, and then decide what protections make sense and move forward. So we don't need to beat anybody up. But
we'll have this conversation tomorrow. Thank you so much again for your time. I am really glad that we could, and as soon as you are ready to launch, I demand that you come and tell us in the group, because I'm sure there are tons of people, judging by the response that we had to my own cry of help when I was, kind of ripped off. I know that there's so many people who are looking for something similar. So I demand that you come to the group and tell us when you're ready to launch. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've been so happy to be here. I really hope that this information helps people that are on this call and that may see this video later, because I really care that people understand that there are ways to protect themselves.
Thank you so much, darling.
Welcome.
I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye.